guys, and welcome to the Thoughtful Therapist podcast. I'm Dr. Jimmy Slaughter. This podcast is a place to think about how we think, carefully, and without any judgment. On the last episode, we talked about ethics in the dark, what to do when no one's watching. Today, we get to test that in a messy, real feeling situation. Well, as real as I can make it, really. This is episode 13, Fun with Ethics. The river wedding dilemma. So let's think this one through one thought at a time. This should be really fun. Now, to start this episode, I would like to preface it by saying that thought experiments like the one I'm going to go through with you today can be a little bit old, a little bit outdated, and can be a little bit uncomfortable. But it kind of needs to be to get us to think critically about our emotional responses and our morals on their most deep levels. So some level of maturity will be needed, as even the way the experiment is laid out might be problematic based on your value structure. That is not meant to offend in any way, just to speak to many different realities of others. There are a few rules with thought experiments that I really want to just get laid out cleanly before I do this. Rule number 1. You cannot change the rules. There are no loopholes. There is no way out. And maybe most importantly, there is no right or wrong answer. They exist only in the choice. So we're not looking to figure out who gets it right, because everyone's kind of going to be right, and it'll be fun to see how we get there. So this is a thought experiment that I came across a long time ago, and I can't remember exactly where, and maybe I molded it myself, but I don't think so. But it's based heavily on several other ones. The river crossing dilemma, the wedding dilemma, the alligator river dilemma, I think is what it's called. But I have coined this one, the river wedding experiment. I'm hoping that I can create this image as we go, so you can kind of see this. But in case I'm not there yet, I will be as careful with my words as physically possible to paint this picture really thoughtfully. So as I walk you through this, I invite you to rank the characters in your mind and notice what comes up for you. There's no right answer, remember, just your honest reactions. So if you're able to grab a pen and paper, that'd be great. Okay, here we go. Let's say that today is the day of a beautiful wedding set on the bank of a wide, beautiful river. There is a majestic small town nestled up on the river's edge. On the other side of the river is a standalone building, a beautiful church where the wedding is to take place. At the church, there's an anxious groom. We'll call him G. He's anxiously pacing the grounds, awaiting the ceremony. In the town on the other side of the river is the stunning bride. We'll call her B. She has gone across the river today to get her dress fitted and put on her hair and makeup for final touches. She goes to the river's edge and finds a boat and a boat captain, we'll call him BC, to get a ride back across the river for her wedding, which starts within the hour. She goes to pay the boat captain for his service and finds that she has lost her purse, or perhaps forgot it on the other side of the river at the church where her early day began. But we don't really know. She just doesn't have it. So she, obviously flustered, bordering on panicked, asks the boat captain if he could please get her to the church on the other side of the river. It is obvious that it is her wedding day and that she is in need of help on this big day. But the boat captain refuses to help without any pay. In fact, he tells her that because it's peak hours, the normal fee has actually been doubled. The bride walks away absolutely distraught. A sleazeball, we'll call him SB, witnesses this entire event and approaches the bride-to-be as she walks away from the marina. He offers to pay her fare across the river in return for a sexual favor. hence sleazebag. Now, before we go too crazy on this, I have to remind you that we only know what we know. We have no idea what he's actually offering. The bride agrees and enters a small dwelling with the sleazeball. She's in the building for 6 or 7 minutes and exits with the money to pay for her ride across the river. Now, the groom's best man, we'll call him BM, just so happened to be at the marina as well and witnessed this entire thing, from her interactions with the boat captain to the encounter with the sleazeball. Seeing this, he quickly crosses the river to report to the groom what he has seen. When the bride finally makes it across the river, the groom has called off the wedding. As a side note, we're going to say that this event takes place at a later time where there are no cell phones, no internet, there's not a bridge across the river, nothing like that. It's just what it is. So take a moment now. And remember, we'll label them G, B, BC, SB, and BM. Who would you rank as the worst person? And why? What experiences or values made that feel so obvious to you? And it's interesting. So feel how certain you feel right now. That feeling of like how obvious it is that it's that person. Because that certainty really matters here. And it's kind of fun because I'll be honest, every time I run this experiment, my own rankings shift depending on what kind of day I'm having. Or even just who I'm speaking to. Some days I'm harder on the bride, other days I'm ready to cancel the groom. And I think that it's the real mirror here. Our ethics aren't really fixed. They're alive with whatever we're holding in our hearts in that given moment. And most of us think we're ranking people. I'm not really sure that we are. I think we're probably ranking values, loyalty, compassion, fidelity, survival, justice, honesty, mercy. And in this case, we are simply attaching those values to people. So I'm going to give you just a few seconds. Have we figured out who the worst person is? What about the second worst? The third? Do you think anyone is completely devoid of responsibility? Let's dive into why we feel like each could be the worst person. As a quick caveat here, each person makes morally questionable choices. Though how questionable and why is entirely the point and is entirely subjective to the listener. Let's start with the boat captain, BC. So I have him labeled here as exploitation through power imbalance, legal versus ethical behaviors, capitalism versus compassion. This is a case where a person is acting appropriately within the system that they're in, while somehow still feeling very immoral in his human responsibility. He didn't even just say no. He raised the rate. He could have taken her across and gotten payment on the other side, where there are almost certainly numerous individuals who would have paid the fare for the lady of the hour. He could have even exploited her for 4 times the wage for his troubles. But he seemingly felt justified within his rules to turn away a woman in need. I use the word woman here because it matters in society and how we judge morality, right or wrong. It just kind of does. Now let's talk about the sleazeball. There's an obvious exploitation of vulnerability here. People often rank him the worst out of pure emotions because, well, it just kind of feels icky or gross what he did. And here's where the experiment gets really uncomfortable, and understandably so. The sexual nature of what he's offering is the part that tends to trigger the strongest reactions, even disgust or anger, because it feels violating, even when the story leaves out the exact act and keeps it ambiguous. And that's real and worth noticing. We're not glossing over that discomfort. We're sitting with why it lands so hard for so many. He exploited a woman in need. But so did the boat captain. I mean, the sleazeball did offer her what she needed in the moment. And sitting with that fact, the discomfort almost gets worse. Even when exploitation exists elsewhere in the scenario. And this is kind of where the ethical work starts to begin with this problem. So morally, the sex act is viewed differently. I mean, I view it differently because it seems in an awful way, I don't know, humanity at its not best. And honestly, the ambiguity of the act changes his rankings most likely. People often rank him as the worst immediately, and I understand why. He seems to be the only person in the story using another person's desperation for his own gratification. He notices vulnerability and immediately asks, what can I get from this? Why is the best man the worst person? In my experience, the best man is often viewed as kind of the white knight of the story. But this tends to kind of fall away. So let's look at it. The best man of the groom witnessed his essentially best friend's bride-to-be in this awful situation. And as far as we know, based on the information, didn't seem to do anything to try to help or intervene. And then it's important to note that he had a way across the river himself, obviously. I mean, he ran across the river to tell a story from a moral high ground that he could have potentially stopped or aided in. And it kind of makes you question his views on the bride, or perhaps on the groom. His intention, in retrospect, seems very hidden. And as humans in big situations like this, we find that ambiguity of morality pretty sketchy. Why is the bride the worst person? Now, the bride is an interesting case. Most people view her in very black and white terms, in my experience, running this experiment. Some people rank her the worst. Some rank her the best. She's not really very often in the middle, which kind of shows the point of the experiment. What she did in a moment of desperation seems like survival, but it screams of a future where a person could make this choice again, even after marriage. I mean, how desperate is desperate enough to cheat? How desperate is desperate enough to cheat and to make that okay? Now, it seems like there's a lot of pressure here: financial, social, internal, relational, like all of these different pressures that the bride is under. Not making the wedding and thinking of her partner on the altar, waiting for the bride that never comes. I can't even imagine what that's like. But the act is the idea that she willingly engaged in whatever this ambiguous act was to get what she needed to cross the river. But the fact that she willingly engaged with the sleazeball to get what she needed to cross the river for her own ends, you can't really discount it. And a lot of people have very strict policy on what we'll say fidelity. Desperate or no, people view this very black and whitely. Now on to the groom. Why would the groom be the worst person? The groom is perhaps the most interesting. It seems as though he's just a victim of circumstance throughout this whole experiment, who behaved in defensible ways with the knowledge he's been provided. But was he? I mean, he's under many of the same pressures of the bride, but he decided to run instead of fight. Right? Like, you could argue that he just gave up on the relationship. And whether it's moral or not, think of what has been done for him. And he wouldn't even provide her with a conversation to understand. He doesn't even know what happened in the dwelling. He gave up so quickly and allowed his emotions and perhaps a corrupt friend not acting in good faith to derail the whole thing. The very thing he said that he wanted, that he was standing up there for. It almost seems to me like he was pacing the grounds with cold feet and was provided a get-out-of-jail-free card that would save him the shame of leaving by placing that on the bride. Now, we don't know that. And he will probably get away from this situation the cleanest out of all of the people if this was a real life situation. If he ran now, what would make him run later? And is that what love is? I really like this experiment because there are literally no right answers. It is 100% moral perspectives. And the ways that I've just thought about each character are not the only ways to think about them. Like, not at all. I'm just providing one out of many potentialities. So it's not about where each person was placed in the hierarchy, but why. And it's almost about how quickly we were willing to defend our morality as obvious. And this is the juncture of where our ethics step out from theory and become deeply personal to us, which is kind of the point of this whole thing. And it's easy to see. And it often shows us a lot about ourselves and the experiences that make this rankings list. This isn't a test of who's good or bad. It's a mirror of what we prioritize when values collide. And it's easy to see that a person who has been cheated on, maybe even a few times, would view the bride as the worst person. You could understand how someone has been turned away by a person who is cold and won't step out of their rigid rules to help in a time of crisis may feel like the boat captain is the worst person. A person who has been taken advantage of or even abused sexually would feel like the sleazeball is the most reprehensible person. After all, I think he may be the only person who may have committed a crime in the whole thing. A person who has been misled by a friend, not worthy of trust, may feel the best man is the worst person. And the groom's aloofness in a relationship where the other party seemingly cares more than they do, or someone who's been abandoned, would probably think that he's the worst person. Now, the longer we sit and think about the situation, it makes us see things in new perspectives through different lenses. It's not black and white, and there are no right answers. So I have to say, this is something that I have run in groups many, many times, in ethics groups with up to 30 people. And I will tell you that the conversations that go back and forth are amazing. So if you're sitting there thinking that there's one obvious answer, I promise you there is not. I have come out of groups thinking that each one of them is different, right? One, it'll be the bride, one, it'll be the groom. And it doesn't really matter. But what's interesting is how all the different people are perceiving this problem and what it means. Because different people will simply not always feel the same as you do about situations that seem so obvious. And we feel so certain in our emotions, like they're just true or facts. They are not. I'm still ranking and re-ranking these 5 people literally every time I do this experiment, and I am never right. Another fun thing that happens is every time I run this experiment, I learn something new, a new perspective that I haven't really thought of, or maybe even like a new hidden feature or a possibility of one of the people. Like, I think, what was it? I was told by someone, it's interesting how the boat captain and the sleazeball are the only 2 people that didn't lie. Okay, so herein lies the rub. Let's say we change things a little bit. Let's start with a really small change. And remember, from an outsider's perspective. Okay, we're all in an outsider's perspective. But let's say that we were to make, I don't know, the boat captain older. Would that change how you ranked him? Would it make him seem worse? What if he was a female and he turned away a sister in need? Would you think of different motives behind the same action? I don't know, jealousy maybe. Okay. So what about the sleazeball? Let's say that we knew the exact sexual favor. And let's say it was significant. I'm not going to label it, as that seems kind of unnecessary, but would that make them seem worse? The sleazeball, or would it even make the bride seem worse? Would it make the groom seem better or the best man seem better? What if the best man was gay? Would that create a new series of potential motives? Or what if it was a best gal? Let's say the best gal witnessed this thing and went screaming across the river without helping to tell the groom. Would you view that the same? Would it be the same? And for a lot of people, it would. But for a lot of people, it wouldn't. Or let's say that we knew that the bride's father was sick and that moving the date of the wedding because of this situation or trying to do a redo would mean that he couldn't walk her down the aisle, which was so important to both of them. Let's say they had a bride and dad dance carefully choreographed. No, that's not the right word. Planned. We'll just say planned. I'm saying, like, wouldn't that increase desperation? Would that change anything? Now, if you're wondering why me, the host, made a lot of the changes based in gender and sexual orientations, it's simply because the experiment itself is sexualized. And while these differences don't mean anything morally on their own, like at all, and I mean, well, at least to me, they certainly don't, it does change the relationship of the people in the experiment. Or at the very least, it could. The point here with the changes is simply that the diversity of information can change how we feel about everything. Our whole lives are managed like this. Most of it is not thought about or ever understood. I mean, seriously, one new piece of information can drastically change an entire scenario that we've been through. And that's why I love this experiment so much, because it really forces us to be comfortable with making choices and decisions based on limited information that we have. And it's amazing how structured our responses become based on that limited information. But then I came across a sociology experiment that honestly made me, it kind of blew my mind. I don't remember the researcher's name, but his findings really stuck with me. He runs a variation of the same experiment every semester with all of his freshmen or Soc 101 classes. Now, he has done many things with variations like I've done today, right? Like changes, small, minute details about each situation. He spent some time running the original experiment as I laid out, as is, without adding any changes to the characters, with the exception of one major difference. He provided pictures of all 5 people in the experiment. And what he did was he provided each person in the experiment with a different level of facial symmetry, or as we would probably know as general attractiveness, to see if that would sway people, to see if they would think differently about it. He provided different people as being attractive for different classes so they don't get wise to his experiment. So what I mean by that is, one class, the boat captain, would be hyper attractive, or another one, it would be the bride would be gorgeous, or the best man would be, stunningly attractive in his suit. But what this professor found is that people are generally far more forgiving of the most attractive person in the scenario and much harsher on the least, which I found truly fascinating. Because that means that we believe that we're being provided real and valuable information based on physical characteristics, which is like the most human thing I can think of. Because morally speaking, that doesn't change anything. So with this experiment, it's interesting that every character represents a virtue in conflict. The boat captain represents justice versus compassion. The bride, loyalty versus survival. The groom, trust versus forgiveness. The best man, honesty versus loyalty. And the sleazeball, freedom versus exploitation. which gives this thing kind of like a whole new lens. So if you're still trying to figure out who the worst person was at this point in the episode, that's the point. The experiment isn't asking us to be right. We probably aren't. It's asking us to notice why we feel so certain. Because what most of us were really ranking wasn't morality. It was closer to something like familiarity. We judge through our own familiar experiences, through our wins, through the things we've forgiven and the things we haven't. And that's what makes ethics so personal on the individual. The moment we feel sure, the moment we think the answer is obvious, is usually the moment we stop being careful. Ethics doesn't live in certainty. It lives in hesitation and restraint, gathering information, asking questions. In that pause of hesitation is where we realize, I might not know everything that matters here. Maybe there is more to the story we don't know yet. And maybe there's not. Or maybe just, that's why I think that way. Maybe ethics isn't about removing bias as much as becoming aware that we have them. So if this experiment was somewhat unsettling, good. If you changed your rankings halfway through, even better. And if you're still unsure, that might be the most ethical place to be. I would normally put forth an honest and thoughtful defense for each person as well, as you'd be surprised at how much that would change people's perceptions on this. But I think that it would probably just be too much information. But at the same time, you'll notice you've probably already started to defend certain people while judging others more harshly. Good. That's the experiment doing its work. Not because your ranking is right or wrong, or because judging people is good, because it's not, but because it begins to reveal the values, experiences, and assumptions that we bring into our stories every day. Please remember the purpose of this thought experiment and every other one. There is no right or wrong. It's just thinking. Period. No correct answer. So if you bring this up or discuss it with people at a later time, please remember to be humble in your thoughts and hear the other person out. You may learn something. And remember, they don't think the same, and that's okay. No two people do. It's one of the reasons each person is so unique and special. And honestly, this experiment is just kind of messed up, and no one leaves it very cleanly. So here's my call to action for you today, and a bit of caution. What information are you still missing that would change how you see these people? What questions would you have? How does that missing information shape your moral and ethical judgments? Does the ambiguity make it worse? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who did you rank where and why? Did your rankings change and shift as new details were added? Or were you pretty steadfast? Like a lot of the changes didn't matter. What, if anything, did you learn about yourself or about how your experiences play a part in your ethics? I'd truthfully love to hear from you. Your answers may surprise you, and they'll almost certainly surprise the rest of us. Thanks for thinking this through with me. The Thoughtful Therapist. And I'd like to give a big shout out to Synergy Health Group. They're a counseling program here in Florida that does telehealth. So if you live in the state of Florida, man, just the ability to talk to someone who gets it means a lot. I urge you to try. All right. Bye.